Hi there. Welcome back to the Out of the Cave podcast with Lisa Schlossberg. I'm your host, Lisa Schlossberg, a licensed social worker, certified health coach, personal trainer, and yoga instructor. If you, like I have, struggle with your relationship with food, eating, and body image, I am here with this podcast to guide you into healing the relationship you have with yourself through a trauma-informed, holistic, and mind-body-soul approach. Together, we can support you in building a lifestyle of more peace, freedom, safety, and power. Hello, and welcome back to the Out of the Cave podcast. I am your host, Lisa Schlossberg, and we are back today with another chapter of my thoughts. So before we get into it, there are a few announcements that I have to share with you. The first, and I think most important, is that as of a few days ago for me, I'm recording this in the beginning of March, the ticket sales for the Omega Retreat are officially live. So if you want the opportunity to come and do this kind of work with me and my guest instructors in a very magical, transformative place, the Omega Institute in New York, we are going to be there July 12th to July 17th, 2026. So I am obviously super stoked to do this again. It was an absolutely amazing experience last summer. So I hope you can make it. If you have any questions for me, please reach out, let me know. The link will be in the show notes. That I will continue to remind you about. That being said, the other thing that I want to share with you is a little bit about my experience creating this podcast series. And I know I already have a little bit, but what I want to share with you is that I am noticing the commitment that I have to you, listener, to record these podcast episodes and release them every single week with the intention of it being valuable for you. So it's not just me talking about my own story, even though I do know and I trust and believe that me sharing bits and pieces of my own lived experience are helpful and are part of the value. There's what feels to me like kind of two deviating paths in front of me. One is these weekly podcast episodes that I will continue to record and release. And then there's something else that wants to happen. It feels as though something else wants to be kind of born of this experience. And so without getting into the really dirty details of how I have arrived at this decision, what I want to tell you is that I'm going to be launching a Patreon account, so that the more vulnerable, more personal, more sticky stuff that I feel nervous about sharing is going to go there instead. So the podcast episodes will still be coming out. It will still continue to be a free resource every single week that, again, I hope provides value. And I get to show up as, the professional who gets to teach and train and share things and still include some personal stories. But there is just so much that wants to be seen and heard. And what I realized is that in order for me to feel safe to do that, this is a way that I can create safety for me to step into being seen and more authentic, that will allow me to tell my story, in a deeper way. So I will share more details about that, but that's what I see happening. And so I am recording this on March 7th. And by the time you hear this, if I have a Patreon account set up, it means that I have made the commitment to myself and I have followed through on it. Because as of right now, this is just an idea. And there is a part of me that is scared to commit to this and share this. But but that's why I'm doing it also, because there is something to be said for accountability. And that's what we have ahead of us. So if you want to check that out, my intention is that by the time you hear this episode, you will have the opportunity to check the show notes, click on a Patreon link, and then go check that stuff out. So that is my second announcement for you. And lastly, my third announcement is that these podcast episodes are now available on YouTube. And the first few, I want to say the solo series all the way up to maybe part 15 or so, is just a static picture with the audio. But if for whatever reason you prefer YouTube, that's available to you now. And as part of that announcement, what I'm also telling you is that from this point on, we're going to be also using the video and releasing the video. So if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, the way that you have always listened to this, and it's always been audio, that's wonderful. And I'm also telling you that part of what's happening for me in real time is that I am showing up for the first time really ever for a solo series with the intention to be physically seen and visible, and for this to become a video and an audio that I release into the world. So the reason that I want to tell you that is because I do want to acknowledge and call out that there's some maybe distraction around that. Like, I'm watching myself and now I'm thinking about the fact that this is going to go be visible elsewhere. And also because I realized as I was getting ready for this that I did a couple of things that I think also can be helpful for you to think about when you yourself have to do things that are scary, vulnerable, out of your comfort zone, uncomfortable. And that is, I am wearing a oversized sweatshirt because that is very comfortable. I'm also wearing a beanie on my head, which is not at all necessary. It is like a straight up comfort item. And I have my tea next to me and I have a bunch of toilet paper because I couldn't find a tissue box. And my big water bottle. So as I was like preparing all of this, I was just thinking about how I do think that there are times where we have to, get out of the comfort zone. We've obviously talked about that a good amount. But one of the tools, one of the, practices that I have now these days, and it took me a while, not just to learn this, but to like accept this, is that there are things that I can do. And my philosophy around it is like, if I'm going to be emotionally uncomfortable, then it's very kind of me to think about how do I give myself some physical comfort. And that is what I'm doing. And the other thing that I just think is interesting is I just got home from the gym. I have not showered yet. And I thought about, taking a shower and doing my hair and putting on my makeup because I am going out tonight. And I could do that now. And I could show up, looking good for this. And my whole body just really didn't want to do that, like really rejected that idea. And I think that part of it is the intention and the desire to show up like fully authentic. That's my intention here. So anyway, that's what's going on with me right now. And I really thank you, whether it is audio or video. Thank you for being here and just continuing to, be on the journey with me, because what a fucking ride. And the last thing I'll say, which goes back to the previous, Patreon announcement, when I hear myself say like, what a ride it's been, what I've been doing a little bit behind the scenes, as you've heard me say, like I've read you my essays that I wrote in college and to get into college and things like that. I'm really doing a lot of going back in time. And ultimately what feels like research, and it's not just research around, certain topics or ideas or things like that. It's research on my own experience. And like I said, like I'm going into kind of the Schlossberg archives of things that I've written and my journal entries. And it is emotional. It really is requiring a lot for me. And I'm here with that. I want to do all of that. But that's also where the inspiration for putting things on Patreon is coming from, is there's really a lot in the details and the depth of my story that I'm reliving and reprocessing and reintegrating and all sorts of things that I want to that want to be seen and heard. So anyway, that's not the purpose of this podcast right now anyway. So that's where it's all going to go. All right, so 10 minutes of announcements, and now let's do the thing. Okay. So, while I feel as though I have in some ways kind of made the point about social identities, the social context, privilege, oppression, things like that, this is another thing that I just feel like I have so much to say, and I don't want to kind of beat a dead horse, but I was thinking about, and part of the reason that I do want to continue this conversation or just kind of share some more examples is because I remember when I first started talking about this, that the way a lot of people responded was, I would have never thought of that. It would have never occurred to me. And that's the whole point of privilege. That's kind of how I would in so many ways define the experience of living with privilege, is that there are a lot of things that you just never have to think about. And so you might hear the word privilege and think, well, there's a lot of different reactions people have to the word privilege. But what I want to focus on, and the reason, again, I think it's important to continue talking about, is because the way that I have seen these examples like open up people's eyes to something that, again, they would never know. And so the whole point is, right, if you grow up white and you have white privilege, there are likely things that never even cross your mind that people who are with black skin have to think about and have to consider and are always conscious and aware of. So when we talk about things like a fragmented consciousness, we've already talked about what that means when, part of you is thinking about one thing and part of you is thinking about another thing. It's like if you have to move through the world where part of your awareness always has to be on the social context, and if you're safe in it because of your identity, that does something to what I believe, how safe you can actually feel, not just with other people, but in your own body, because that energy is always kind of, scanning the environment. And so what I remember, like one of these examples for me, like I was saying in the last episode about when I started learning about all of this, I remember learning specifically about the example, like one version of where white privilege shows up in my life was that I can go to a store like a CVS and I can find a Band-Aid that is the color of my skin. Right. And so growing up, and I think that's a little different now, but again, like this was 10 plus years ago that I was learning things like this. And so that's an example, right, of like, oh, with my white privilege, I never had to think about the fact that I can go to the store and buy a Band-Aid the color of my skin. And that is how I experience and benefit from having white skin. And this is just one example. There are an endless amount. But what I remember also was now as I was piecing together how that's also true around body size, in one of my sociology classes, I ended up making a list of like a bullet point list of the things that I can do now in a thin body. And the first one that I wrote was I can wear hair ties on my wrist. And I remember as I was losing weight and once I lost weight, that was so exciting to me. It was so exciting to me because in a bigger body, I always had to like keep hair ties somewhere, like in my backpack or in the bathroom or whatever. I always had to have them accessible if I wanted to use one, but I very rarely could actually wear it on my wrist because it would cut my circulation off. And so when I lost weight, I could wear hair ties. And I was so excited about that because I didn't need to think about it. I could just have them on my person whenever I wanted them. And so I remember, and it was, so that was the first example, but then it was like, other things you've heard me say before, I could go to the movie theater without worrying that I would fit into it. I could go to a restaurant without having to be worried about sitting in a booth. I'm reading it in front of me right now. I can trust that the seatbelt of a car will close without a problem. I can buy unhealthy food or eat large portions without people judging me or my lifestyle. I don't need to find special shapes, sizes, designs for clothing items, things like that. And it goes on and on and on and on. But again, the reason I'm saying this is because I do feel on some level that this is what my story is here to do. It's not just here to wake me up, but to wake up. I mean, it's coming out of the cave. Like, again, it's raising the consciousness. And so if these are things that I've experienced that other people hear and are like, wow, I would never, most people are like, I never thought about the fact that I could just put a hair tie on my wrist. Like, that's crazy. And so that, I think, is just, it felt a little incomplete to not bring awareness to these things because, again, it's very similar to me to say, if you have white skin, you have no idea what it's like to live in this social context with black skin. And if you have always been thin, you have no idea what it's like to move through this social context in a bigger body. And that's okay. But again, I think if we're talking about changing our bodies, this is the context within which we're doing it, and that matters. So ultimately, in some ways, what I'm saying is, again, do I think that society should operate this way? Definitely not. However, I'm no longer in denial of the fact that there is a social capital that comes with weight loss or the kind of weight loss that I experienced. There just is. And again, I don't think it's responsible to have this conversation without acknowledging that. Okay, next up is another reflection I had listening to the last couple of episodes. I would be wondering, I think, if I were you, how to stop caring what other people think, because I'm giving you multiple examples about how being distracted by other people is a distraction and ultimately disconnects you from yourself. Cool. I think we've made that clear. And so if I were listening to this, I would be curious about, okay, well, how do I stop caring what other people think about me then? If it's so destructive to my own health and healing, how do I not care that much? And this is a question that I've gotten many times in coaching calls and things like that, which is how do I just not? And so what I want to share with you first is that why and how that kind of misses the point. And you don't really want to be thinking about how you can get yourself to not care that much, because that is not really an option. So if we go back and look at brain science and the evolution of the human race, it's a survival mechanism, and it has evolutionary purposes that we care what other people think, because we are pack animals and we need to be in connection and in community with other people in order to be safe, right? So if we're left alone, we will die. We can't be here alone, and our brain is wired for connection with other people. So we have to care what other people think. We have to feel accepted by the tribe in order to be safe. So when you ask the question, how do I get myself to stop caring? What you're doing is positioning yourself to fight against your neurobiology. You can't do that, right? Which is why, even in the examples that I've given you, it's not that I don't care. It's that I care, and then I move through the process of coming back into my own body and being present with myself and remembering that other people's judgments are none of my business. It's not that I don't care, because there's always going to be that kind of initial concern or initial reaction. And that's the brain doing what it does. That's the brain keeping you safe. That is the brain making sure that you're part of the tribe. And so I also think in addition to that, right, in addition to kind of getting distracted and then bringing yourself back, the visual of the playground and then, coming back, in addition to all of that, I once heard, and I want to share with you what I heard Brene Brown say once about this kind of thing. And I'm paraphrasing, but, someone asked a question somewhere around something like, how do I stop giving a shit about what people think? And the way I remember she answered it was something like, you're not going to stop giving all your shits. The question is, how many shits are you giving and who are you giving them to? And this idea is really powerful because this is how you want to think about it, where it's like, if I get some feedback or criticism or judgment in some way, the question is, how do I filter that through my own value system? So like if someone is, judging me or making fun of me, is that something that I actually care about? Is that something that I want to listen to? Is that some feedback that I want to integrate, right? For example, as you've heard me say, if someone is making a judgment based on what I look like, it's like, okay, well, when I weigh that against my own set of values, that's not something that I care. I don't define myself that way. And so it's easy for me to be like, oh, okay, well, you're judging me by what I look like. I don't really care. You don't get my shits. Okay. I'm not giving you my shits. I don't give a shit about this. However, if you were to give me some feedback that I hurt your feelings or that I, acted out of character, and then I take that to my values and I say, is this something that I care about? And it's like, yes, this is something that I care about. Okay, well, that gets my shits. This is something that I do give a shit about. And so that's why I think it's important to clarify that there really is no such thing as like just not caring. But then once you're mindful of kind of the feedback or even the judgment that you're receiving, not all of it matters because it's not going to be stuff that you necessarily care about. So as you are out there in the world experimenting with having an animal brain in a social context, that's really what I want you to remember. Don't get down on yourself. Don't be hard on yourself because your mind automatically cares what other people think. That's evolution doing its job. That's neither here nor there. That's where you want to focus on, right? As you've probably heard before, your first thought is your conditioning. In this sense, your first thought is evolution and survival. It's your second thought you want to pay attention to. That's where you show up. That's where you get to be present with yourself and decide if this is something you want to care about or not. So like, again, when people see me work out and I can sometimes get distracted by that, I have to remember that that's actually not important. That's not a value of mine. The value of mine at the gym is to focus on myself, and I get to bring myself back to that. Okay, now, having said that, the other thing that came to me, I thought about this months ago, but now I get to tell you about it, is one time when I was a personal trainer and I was in the middle of a session with like a middle-aged woman, and there was an older woman, like probably in her 70s or so, if I had to guess, maybe late 60s, that would always consistently walk around the gym in like just a sports bra and leggings. And she'd do her workout. I think she was a trainer at one point. And so I remember that this older woman was walking around the gym the way that she always did, with her kind of belly hanging out a little bit, but like, yeah, just in a sports bra. And the woman that I was training made a comment to me about like, why does she always walk around without a shirt on? Like, what is she doing? And like, why can't she just like put clothes on? It's so inappropriate. It's so whatever. And it was very clear that it was coming, from this energy of just like judgment. She was being very judgmental. And at the time I remember being like, yeah, I know, just kind of listening to her do that. And the reason that I have thought about this so much since, I mean, this was over 10 years ago, but I remember this so well because to me, it was, and now is even more clear that, as I was saying again in the previous episode, this woman who was in so much judgment was judging this person outside of her based on her own like insecurity. So the reason I'm bringing this up now is because I know I have talked about, when other people are judging you, it's a reflection of their own stuff. It's not about you, it's about them. This is how they look at themselves in the mirror. This is the way they judge and critique themselves. And the other thing that I just want to share and put on your radar is that the same is true about the way you judge other people. That if it's not just other people judging you, it's also you judging other people. And again, this is the animal brain existing in a social context. It's okay that we do that. It's inevitable that we do that. But it's another way for you to pay attention to what's going on inside is notice when you're judging other people, when you're looking at people being like, why, how, what is she doing wearing that? Like, pause, take a moment, because that's your first thought. That's not your second thought. That's your first thought. Your first thought is judgment. Your first thought is divisive. It's like different than other people. If you are feeling insecure or feeling not good enough or feeling scared, that's how you're going to walk around the world, in judgment of other people. And so ultimately what I'm saying is you get to kind of follow that thread and see what's going on with you. What can you learn about you? Because we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And that's true for you as much as it is for anyone else, myself included. And I just have to shout out, like, here's another specific example of this. I remember, I'll never forget this. And I know the client I was working with will never forget this. We still to this day refer to this session we had where she was sitting at work. She was sitting at work and it was lunch. And one of the women that she works with at like a cubicle near her was eating French fries. And my client came in talking about this huge emotional reaction that she was having to this other woman's French fries. And it was this whole thing, right? Like, why does she get to eat French fries? And why does she feel safe to eat French fries? And I want to eat some French fries. And I don't know the last time I ate a French fry. And like all this big reaction to this. And it was such a great, so powerful, eye-opening session because once we did the work together, we peeled back the layers of it. It became that, an awareness around the French fries are a symbol for freedom. And it became this whole thing about like this woman over here eating these French fries. She is free to do what she wants. And I, in my life, am not feeling free around food, around this, around that, in my relationship, and like all sorts of things. And so again, what I'm saying is when you find yourself looking around, it doesn't have to be at the gym. It doesn't necessarily have to be about bodies and clothes and what people are wearing or how they're working out or anything like that. It's like, this is where it translates outside of just the gym into like real life. When you see people doing things and you have big reactions, like, follow the thread back to what does that mean about you and how you're feeling in your own life, because it is not about them. Okay, now, after I listened to the last couple episodes, I did think about a couple more things that occurred to me that I didn't think of in time. So today, I know I said at the end of last one, I was like, I'm so complete. This is the end of this little sidebar series. LOL, JK. Is anything ever complete when I think it is? So ultimately, I know I'm saying this, 25, 28, 20, almost 9 minutes into this episode. This is kind of like a transition episode because I have follow-ups and, I'm not going to move forward without sharing them. So other things that are and have been tools for me to practice everything that I've been talking about in terms of ultimately staying focused and present on my own experience without getting distracted by other people. And one of the things, so I talked about, my bubble and closing my eyes and things like that. But I also recently have been practicing nostril breathing, like exclusively nostril breathing, or trying anyway. And the reason I'm telling you about this, and I know I mentioned, Sean Jacobs in the episode about breathing, But this is another thing that has helped me anchor in to my workout and my present moment felt embodied experience of my workout is not just focusing on the breath in a general sense, but also challenging myself to breathe exclusively through my nose. And especially when I'm doing cardio or I'm on the treadmill, that's a real challenge, but it's another way. Like, part of the reason that I've been enjoying this is because it really dials me into the mindfulness exercise that it is. I could be thinking about my run or my sprints as a mindfulness activity, but when I pair it with the challenge to only breathe through my nose, I cannot think about anything else. Like, I have to be really locked into that. And so that's just another thing that I want to offer to you, because then, and I've noticed this, like I'm running the experiment on myself, because when I first heard about, how we're not really supposed to like breathe through our mouth as much as we do, and that we can, activate our own stress response by breathing through our mouth instead of our nose, I was kind of like, I don't know, I think that's bullshit. Because that's how I was in relation to anything that I was like in denial of, because I wasn't already doing it. It was another thing that I wasn't already doing, so I wasn't already good at it. And so I was like, no. But I've now been like experimenting with it more and more, and I really feel a difference. I really feel a difference. So it's fascinating to me that like some days what I've done at the gym is be intentional to notice, how does a workout feel? Like if I'm going to do a somewhat high intensity, like full body workout, which is where I personally feel the most like the gym is a playground, because it's like I have a medicine ball in front of me and a kettlebell and dumbbells and jump rope and Bosu ball, and like I just get all the kind of things and I play around. When I do a workout like that and I'm breathing kind of mindlessly, that feels one way. I can notice the level of stress that causes the mind-body system to experience. But more recently, now I've been doing like the same kinds of workouts, but only nostril breathing, to the point where like I will stop the exercise if I can't keep breathing through my nose. And then I finish it and my whole body feels so much less stressed out. And it's wild. Like I'm experiencing it over and over again. And that's also why, I just keep in mind that exercise is stressful. High intensity interval training is stressful. I know that. But so if I can breathe through my nose and communicate and provide these cues of safety to my system as I'm stressing myself out, as I'm getting uncomfortable, as I'm bringing my heart rate all the way up, that creates a very different experience than if I weren't. And I get so curious, like if I could test my own cortisol level after each of those workouts, like one mouth breathing, one nostril breathing, I'm sure there are studies on this, I would be so interested to see, because I can guarantee the cortisol level would be lower only nostril breathing. So that's just another thing I want to throw on your radar and offer as a practice. See where it takes you. Okay, other thing that feels honestly like a tool is related to breathing, and that is my exhales. And I think about how, if you have a dog, you probably experience this. When a dog is like lying on the couch and then out of nowhere is just like like a big exhale. And then the joke is always like, oh, your life is so stressful. Like what's going on over there that's got you so stressed out? And the reason I bring that up is because it's like, we know intuitively that kind of sigh, that expression is like, that's why that joke sometimes, or very often I think, comes up of like, oh, what's got you so stressed out? Because we know intuitively that is a release. That is a release that needs to happen. And that one of the things that we can do if we're not worried about how it's going to come off or like being again in a social context, is use the exhale that we feel like we need to have. And so again, this is like, it's hard to teach, but I can experience it so much now, but especially when I'm working out, where I will allow myself to exhale and expel the energy for the sake of regulating my system. And so where that comes in, I'm in my everyday life. Like, for example, I noticed this morning when I was walking. I'm walking, nothing strenuous, like I'm on a stroll. And then kind of all of a sudden, I'm having some thoughts that are creating some feelings. And I realize myself take a big exhale, like, and I can feel the regulation happen in real time. Like I needed that. And so, especially now when I'm lifting weights or I'm doing cardio, I'm not afraid of making noise with the way that I breathe. And when I think about the yoga studio that I used to go to, that was so hot. It was so hot. They call it the hottest studio in Orange County. I think it's the hottest studio on planet Earth. And as part of that, the heart rate is really high, but depending on the instructor, they would sometimes cue us to take a big breath and then like really let it out. And I have gotten into the practice of doing that, where again, I'm not kind of like storing that energy that needs to be expelled in my body. The breath is a way to push it out. And so when I'm working out, I will do that. And sometimes, I don't know, I have my headphones in most of the time, but sometimes that means I'm like kind of grunting. Nothing crazy, okay? Nothing crazy. Because I do think that there is something to be said for like kind of keep it to yourself in terms of, the guys that end up like screaming at the gym. That's not what I'm talking about. But I am talking about kind of not being so shy and timid that it is again affecting the way that you breathe, and not letting the fear of like, like we think about it as like, oh, okay, what's worse that's going to happen? Someone's going to hear you breathe. But it's like, no, this is deeper than that. It's being seen. It's being heard. It's taking up space. Again, especially for women in something like a gym environment, it can feel vulnerable to let your breath be heard. It can. And so what I'm saying to you is this comes back to, kind of attachment versus authenticity. Are we going to let the fear that other people might notice us or our breath or our exhale or a little grunt when you lift a weight get in the way of your own self-regulation or lack thereof, So it's just another thing to pay attention to. And this is why, for what it's worth, when for example, when I moved to Brooklyn, I went to every gym within like a 45-minute walk because I wanted all the free day passes. I wanted to check out all the options and not pay for anything for like a week. And then I had to figure out where I really wanted to go. And there are some gyms where I straight up don't feel welcome or comfortable because this is the way that I work out, And if I'm at a gym that suggests that you should be quiet, that's not it for me. That's not going to work for me. And again, I'm not talking about making like an inconsiderate amount of noise, but I am going to prioritize working out at a place where I feel like I can be myself. And that's where, again, I get to consider the social impact and the social environment on me getting to be really embodied in authenticity as I'm exercising. I hope that makes sense. Okay, now another thing that I thought of is visualization, as I have shared here before. So at this point, I'm so excited to tell you that I can do 55 push-ups in a row. And that is definitely my PR, which is my personal record. I've been building up to it for a while, I didn't start here, but I'm thinking about that because what I notice is When I think about the fact that I'm about to get on the floor at the gym and do 55 push-ups, that's another thing that could get some attention from people. And it does. I had a guy recently at the gym say, when I watch you do push-ups, it reminds me of when I was in the military. And I was like, I love that. But so as one of the ways that I bring myself into my own workout and not get distracted by that is I visualize. And so when I am doing push-ups, my face is staring at the ground, and what I'm visualizing, what I'm literally visualizing in my mind as I'm doing each push-up is the number that I'm on. So I see, and a lot of the time, some of the time my eyes are closed, but mostly they're not, because when you're staring at the ground, there's not a lot of distraction happening there. But I literally will envision a 1 in front of me, and then a 2 in front of me, and a 3. And that is how, it's almost like if I could like draw it with chalk on the ground. That's what I'm focusing on. And so that's how I keep the rep count. That's how I keep my focus. That's how I keep myself, present and not distracted. And so I do find that, if you're lifting weights and you're counting reps and sets and things like that, that's another way you can focus on your breath, inhale and exhale as you move, but you can also focus on the numbers and counting. And what it reminds me of too is, if you've ever done box breathing, which is inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds. Or you've done triangle breathing, which is like an inhale for 3, hold for 3, exhale for 3. These are both associated with shapes. Okay. So they're also really good for kids. If you want to teach mindful breathing to children, there's a box breathing and there's triangle breathing. And so I know that for me, when I first started doing things like, mindful breathing and just setting the intention to strengthen my mind body connection, if I were doing box breathing, I would literally envision a box in my mind, and sometimes they say you can draw it. You can actually draw a box as you inhale for 4, and then you exhale and hold it. And like, there's all different ways to combine like movement and breathing and visualization at the same time. And so whether you're doing that while you're working out or not, it's just another way to practice mindfulness. Ultimately is draw the shapes, make the shapes, draw the numbers, like things like that, like engage your mind visually to support you in staying present in your body. That's another tool. And then as I was thinking about this, the other one that I use a lot is when I'm running sprints on the treadmill. So like I said, like I'm going to run as fast as I can, as fast as the treadmill will go. Most treadmills, it was 12, I guess it's miles per hour. And now it goes up to 12.5, which is exciting. And so I'll sprint as fast as I can for somewhere between probably 20, 25 seconds or so. And then I hop off and my feet are on the side of the treadmill. And that's how I do it. And so what I realized at a certain point was when I'm at maximum speed and I'm about to like jump back onto the treadmill to keep running, what I imagine is that I was playing softball for a while, and I think that's where this came from, was I imagined that I just hit the ball. Like I was up at bat and I swung the bat, I hit the ball, and now it's time, like I have to book it to first base. And I'm going to run as fast as I can. And so I imagine that as I'm about to get back on the treadmill, I've hit the ball and it's time to book it. And I just go all out for a few seconds. And so I'm saying all this because it's like, again, if you're looking at me from the outside, you have no idea what's going on inside my head. You have no idea that I'm like very intentionally using these tools, but I am. And that is why I feel as though I'm able to do these things that are like really high intensity or whatever else and feel safe and present and not distracted by other people. Now, having said all of that, The other thing is, just in general, this is what I'm talking about is the mind muscle connection in some ways, which I think could have its own entire series of podcast episodes, but I'm not going to do that. But if you want to look up and explore and do some research about the mind muscle connection, I would really recommend doing that if this is of any interest to you, because it is so real. It is so real. And the amount of like studies and things that show that if you are working out and like lifting weights and you are connected to and feeling and present with the muscle that you're working compared to if you're doing that same exact exercise, same amount of reps, same amount of sets, same amount of weight, all the things are the same, but you are distracted and you're not present in your body with it. It's fascinating because what we see and what we know is that the people with a mind muscle connection actually grow bigger, stronger muscles. I don't know if you know this. I don't know if this is like common knowledge, but it has been studied and proven. We know this to be true scientifically. And so any good personal trainer, by the way, as well, will be supporting you in paying attention to your body, like Dennis, who changed my life with the deadlift, right? Good personal trainers will also guide you to feel the part of your body that you're working, not just because it's going to support you feeling safe, but because it will actually yield better results. And then this might be a little bit of a sidebar too, but I think this stuff is so important because all of this is about you partnering with and befriending your body so that you all in one piece can go where you want to go. What it makes me think of is also as you're paying attention to your mind muscle connection, as you're working out or as you're doing cardio, whatever it is, you also will likely start to notice where you compensate and where you start, hear me when I say this, where you start holding tension and stress in your body in a way that you're not aware of. So I'll give you an example. I used to see this all the time when I was a personal trainer, again, especially in women, that if I were putting someone on a row machine, so with that, not the cardio kind of row machine, like the work your back muscles row machine. So basically, if you are not familiar with what that means, if you were to sit on a chair, up against your chest is up against a pad, and there are two handles in front of you that you pull backwards. Okay. And that is working your back muscles. So what I would see all the time, especially for people who are not familiar with this machine or this movement, is that as people would go to pull the row machine back, their shoulders would lift all the way up. And so the cue for me as the personal trainer would be drop your shoulders and now do the same thing. But what I found fascinating about it is that this was, just the way that when I'm stressed out and I'm just walking around going for a stroll, but I'm stressed out, my shoulders rise because that is one way that I store stress and tension in my body. Okay. So when people would get on this machine to row backwards, their shoulders would come up. And very often what I would see and discuss with them is that this is an unfamiliar movement. I've never been on this machine before. I don't know how this works. Am I doing it right? This is it's vulnerable and there's fear and there's emotion that comes up. And that's why it is super valid that we do things like raise our shoulders. That's what we do when we get nervous. That's what we do when we get scared, right? Very often when I'm leading a meditation, and I can see the people in front of me, all I have to say is drop your shoulders. And it's like everyone's shoulders can drop a little bit. We live that way a lot of the time. Not all of us, but definitely myself. So you start to notice as you pay attention to your body and how your body feels when you're moving it, when you're lifting and things like that, you also will start to notice where you start to hold stress and tension in a way that you are not aware. Because as I keep saying, if you're doing this in the gym, if this stuff is coming up in the gym, socially, emotionally, physically, physiologically, it's also happening outside of the gym. And that's what you really want to pay attention to. So, right, if you're working out and you start to notice that your shoulders go up, your shoulders are probably going up when you get nervous outside the gym too. And if you have chronic shoulder pain, maybe you want to start to pay attention to things like that. right? You see where I'm going with this? The other thing, by the way, is I just had a conversation about this recently, and my client who's listening, you'll know, here's a shout out. We were talking about the same exact thing with grip strength, right? So if you are doing, and this happens again very often, if you are either, tired or stressed or distracted, and you are doing an exercise with a dumbbell, you might notice that you are gripping to the dumbbell for dear life. And not because you have to. I mean, let's say you're doing bicep curls, which is like the most typical like gym bro move, right? Like you're holding a dumbbell in your hand and then you're curling it upwards, like you're just bending your elbows, right? But if you are feeling uncomfortable or again, stressed or distracted, fragmented consciousness, you might find that your grip, you're like gripping to it really, really, really tight. And that's not because you need to be. I mean, you could essentially just like let it dangle in your fingertips and you could still be getting the bicep curl out of it. And so these are ways that as you start to pay attention to what's actually happening in your body, you'll be able to also take this intel outside the four walls of the gym. And so there's a couple examples I want to tell you. One is I used to notice in yoga, and I only noticed this in yoga because I had good instructors that would bring my awareness to it. But what used to happen in yoga is that, again, like I would work so hard to nail the pose. And the instructions I would get sometimes would be to pay attention to my feet, and not just my feet, but my toes specifically. How are my toes like gripping or not to the earth beneath me? And it's fascinating to me because I start to notice, and this is exactly how this stuff works. I start to notice that while I'm in yoga and I'm bringing the awareness to my toes, they are also gripping the earth for dear life. Like there's so much stress and tension in my toes, which is something that I would never be aware of or frankly ever think about. And so now in my everyday life, not just when I'm in a yoga class, I notice when I'm stressed, or I notice, like I'll just bring the awareness to my toes and I will see that they are gripping the earth. Or the ground. I'm so used to saying earth, I guess, but like gripping the ground beneath me. And it just takes a mindful moment to like release the stress and tension there. And like, that's another way of me just checking in on my body, noticing that there is a contraction happening that I'm not even aware of, because this is often how it goes. And then I have the opportunity to say, okay, I can release that. Right? So sometimes it's the toes. I've also noticed this with my ankle. Sometimes we get into what's called like a holding pattern. And I noticed at a certain point that I was just like constantly flexing my foot, especially my left one, don't know. And it just became a mindful habit of like check in on my ankle, check in on my foot, check in on my toes, just checking in, because we talked about interoception, like the ability to know what's going on inside your body. And this is why life is yoga and everything is a mindfulness activity if you want it to be, and everything can connect the mind to body, because it becomes a lifestyle of being aware of what's going on inside your body rather than outside. The other thing that I want to tell you about to kind of piggyback off of that, and this will probably be, just given the timing, the last kind of component of this episode. And is anyone surprised to hear that I've got like 1/4 of the way through the things that I have written down? So here, we're doing it. We're on the journey. But here's, I think, again, something that's important to clarify and talk about. And this is especially important for those of you who, again, are struggling with symptoms of chronic pain, because I think that there are a few ways to go about healing. And what I experienced, so as you probably already know, like I was saying in the last couple episodes, like I lost all the weight and then I went on semester at sea, and then I had IBS symptoms and I was really struggling digestively. And I'm, again, not going to get into the details of all of that. But years later, It was actually toward the tail end of the teacher training I did for yoga back in 2020-ish. I started struggling with some real hip pain. But honestly, now that I think about it, I think it might have even been a little bit earlier than that. But it was this left side hip pain that if you asked me back then, I would say got worse when I ran or did sprints or something like that. And I thought that what I needed was rest and, maybe I was like working out too hard or whatever it was. But I had this like chronic hip pain is what I'm saying. And at this point, I didn't even necessarily think of it as chronic hip pain because I thought that my chronic pain symptoms were IBS. Like I'm a digestive issue person. I'm not also a hip pain person. This must be physical. It's so interesting how the brain works. Like I was so convinced, digestive issues, I could consider myself chronic pain or like a person that has chronic pain in that arena. But when it came to my hip, it was like, no, this has got to be because I'm working out. This has got to be because I'm running. So anyway, for years, I was doing things like physical therapy, massage, just taking days off from the gym, and ultimately living with the belief that there were just certain things I couldn't do or I couldn't do it that often, things like that. Then I get an x-ray done, I get an MRI, I'm doing all the things. And now I think I'm starting to see that this is like very typical kind of chronic pain stuff, but I'm still really bought into like, this is a physical issue. Because then I remember at a certain point, I went and I had the scans read and the conversation I had with the doctor was, he was like, there's really nothing here. We don't see really anything on the x-rays, this and that. And so I remember sitting down with him and he said, basically we're going to call this chronic lower back pain or something like that. Cause it was kind of like hip, lower back. Honestly, at some points it shot down my whole left leg. I thought it might be my IT band, potentially sciatica. I don't know. But it was like, it depended on the day. Sometimes it was like a 10 out of 10, like literally I would be like limping around and sometimes it was like gone. And so it was typical in a lot of ways. But as soon as I heard a doctor say, we're going to call this chronic pain and you just have to do your best, I was like, okay, thank you for letting me know that there's nothing on the x-ray. Okay, so again, the reason that I want to tell you this is because I'm gonna tell you how this proceeded from here, because I know that there are a lot of people who listen to this who struggle with chronic pain. So going to physical therapy, things like that, nothing really helps. I mean, everything's a band-aid. And then I got a massage once and I was very lucky and grateful that the masseuse that I had at the time was, I want to say, very just intuitive. And he managed to just kind of know how to be with me in this experience, which was, I'm on the massage table. He moves over to my left hip, left glute, left side of my lower body. And as he gets, close to this area, and it was always this like one specific area. And I always blamed it on the piriformis. If you know about the piriformis and the piriformis muscle, like a lot of tension can go in there. It's a kind of sticky spot. And what I used to really want is for a masseuse, even though I was like scared and uncomfortable and in pain, what I used to want is for them to like essentially dig their elbow into it and like rub it out. And it would be excruciating. That's what my physical therapist used to do. Excruciating, but it did give me some relief. So like a deep tissue massage, right? So as he is moving over to this area of my body, he starts to notice that now I'm contracting, like my whole body is contracting. And I'm literally embodying fight, flight. Like I'm in contraction, I'm in fear, I'm in free, like whatever it is, it's clear. And so he asked me, he was like, is this okay? Do you want me to stop, or does something hurt or whatever? And I was like, no, 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 it's fine. And I do want you to work on this area, but it sometimes causes a lot of pain and I'm really scared. And so that's why you're seeing me like contract. And so he kind of knew what to do. And I felt like he was very attuned to me emotionally. And I didn't think necessarily anything of it, but he kind of slowed down. He was very gentle and kept kind of checking in with me, like, is this okay? And as this was happening, I like couldn't stop crying. Like all these tears just started flowing out of me. And he didn't ask any questions. He didn't make me feel uncomfortable. He didn't make me think that, anything was wrong. And I think I knew enough about the mind-body connection at this point to be like, oh, this is appropriate. Like this makes sense. My whole body was just contracting in fear. And then we collectively, him and I together, were able to bring like safety into this. And now I'm crying. Like I'm releasing emotion. I don't know what this is about. I don't know why I'm so scared. And I remember saying that to him. I was like, I don't know why I'm so scared. I don't know why I'm so emotional. And he was wonderful because he was really just like, it's okay. It's okay. Like let it happen. And so that was a very powerful experience. But part of the reason that I'm telling you this is because I then had, at a certain point, I had a female masseuse, and her and I had another conversation about the mind-body connection and holding stress and tension in the body. And after a couple of these experiences, because until this point, my understanding or belief was that if I had any sort of chronic pain, there was like a way to deal with that. There was like the procedure and the protocol of like journaling and meditating and like just self-compassion and doing that and doing that and doing that. But then as I experienced this, there was also now what felt like another path, because what I started doing was just simply setting the intention to notice this part of my body throughout the day. So as I just shared, like I started to pay attention to my toes and my ankle and things like that. Years ago, I started to say, well, what if I just start paying attention to this hip area and see what I find? Like clearly I'm contracting it and I'm like holding all this stress and tension in it throughout the day in ways that I'm not even aware of. So like maybe I can practice becoming aware of that. And that's what I started doing. And I'll never forget that I one time was watching a movie, some movie or some show or something, and it started getting stressful. It was, the car chase or the bank robbery or whatever. Like it was like, the music is speeding up and all of a sudden I notice that I start clenching, like essentially my left butt cheek. Like I'm like clenching this area in my body again, like for dear life. And I noticed that and I'm like, oh, okay. So like just bring the awareness to it and relax it. And then I notice it over and over and over and over again, not just when I'm watching something stressful or thinking something stressful or whatever, but I just started noticing how often this is the part of my body that was like storing all the stress and all the tension. And just practicing on a essentially daily basis, minute to minute basis, noticing that and then actively releasing it. And then noticing it, if it's stressed, if it's tense, if it's contracted, releasing it. And sometimes it would be, I would release the tension in my body and I would feel scared. I would actually feel the emotion of fear, or I would start crying again or something. And there were also many times where I would think about, okay, release the tension, and there would be so much resistance. It was like, I don't want to, I don't feel safe to. And this is the whole thing is like, our bodies are speaking to us. Our bodies have this whole language, that we get to interpret. And so after years, and I'm bringing this up also because I've been doing so much walking, so much running, so much activity. And I'm so, again, like strong, and I'm active like every single day. And so recently, it was just a couple weeks ago that my mom happened to ask me, do you ever have that hip pain anymore? And I was like, no, because it wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't physical. It was physical, but it was physical because it was rooted in stress and emotion. And here's why I want to say this too, because I don't know, if I did a lot of journal speak about it or journaling, what would have come to me or what I would have discovered or how it would have healed or not healed. I don't know. And I can't speak to that, but I can speak to feeling really stuck and struggling with a symptom of chronic pain where I got to connect with my body in real time, practice releasing the stress and tension around it, practice the non-attachment to the outcome of it, and really be very present and intentional on a day-to-day basis in direct relationship with it. So not like I'm going to do this practice so that my body heals, but like, can I just be with my body in this experience and release the tension and see what kind of emotion comes up and create space for that and no longer have this pain at all. And so I want to offer that. I want to offer that to you because I also remember years ago when I sat down with someone who had healed a good amount of their own kind of chronic pain stuff. And what he said to me was to kind of focus on or identify a part of my body where there was a good amount of stress or tension. And at the time, lo and behold, I was sharing that it was in my shoulder. And I mean, to this day, like my chronic discomfort. And even like when I go in for massages, they're like, these are boulders, these are rocks that you have, the knots in my back and my upper shoulders. So anyway, so I remember sitting with him and being like, I have this pain in my shoulder. It's really uncomfortable. And he guided me through very similar kind of approach of like connecting with it and just being in my body with the pain and shifting my relationship toward it and, kind of talking to it and breathing into it and all sorts of things. And then I remember being like, wow, that went from like an 8 to like a 3. And it was just in a matter of minutes of being, again, present in my body. So I'm saying that because, if you are someone who has, chronic shoulder pain or something like that, and you just don't realize that throughout the day, when you get stressed out, you're putting all this tension in your shoulder, that might be something you want to pay attention to. The same way that I would have said, I have chronic hip pain, but then once I started paying attention to it, I was able to actually kind of alleviate all of it. And again, to this day, I still notice, oh, there it is again. There it is again. For whatever reason, my left butt cheek loves clenching up when things get scary. But like, okay, I am still, though, able to do all the sprints that I want. I'm still able to do all the workouts that I want. I no longer think of myself as someone who has hip pain. And so that is very exciting. And I think in some ways what I'm saying is, what they say about all the ways to skin a cat. There's like, why are these sayings the way that they are? Why are we skinning cats? Why are we beating dead horses? Why are we throwing out the bathwater with the baby? Like, it's like, I don't know. Language is so interesting. So anyway, there are multiple ways to arrive at like the end goal of alleviating your pain, I think, is what I'm trying to say. Anyway. Okay. So, guys, here we are. It's been an hour and 10 minutes just about. And I'm going to wrap it there because that's the commitment to myself and to you that these episodes will be roughly an hour. But what I can tell you is that the next one, potentially two, three, who knows, is really going to say more about the mindset that has allowed me to practice things like, working out high intensity and not caring or not being preoccupied with other people's thoughts, tying that all the way back to the curriculum of girlhood and that fragmented consciousness, mindfulness, all like kind of more about how to integrate all of this again into your daily life, because that's what we're going for. And that also is why, or I want to include these things because I also understand and recognize, not everyone is going to a gym or working out or participating in movement. Not everyone can. Not everyone has the ability, the privilege of doing that. And a lot of these things that, again, I get to practice in the gym, there's just commonalities, or not even common, but there's like fundamental principles of how I would describe that kind of mindset that you don't need a gym for, you really don't. It's just where I get to practice it. So I want to tell you a little bit more about that, how to integrate a lot of this, because whether it's in the gym or not, this is about you feeling safe in your body as the foundation for all of it. So anyway, we did it. It is now 1 hour and 11 minutes, the magical time. And I'm going to call it. I'm just going to call it. So thank you again for being here. I hope you enjoy potentially watching these on YouTube if you are excited about that. And I also hope to see you on Patreon. I don't know. I'm new to this. So that's all for now. I love you. I love you a lot. Thank you. And have the best week ever. Mwah.